Hi everyone, I'm Lucy Claire Vanderwide and this is my persuasive speech. Today I'm talking about why immigrants should have access to public health care. I want to start by asking everyone, have you ever been turned away from a health facility? How many of y'all simply just don't have access to health care? I know for me, and most of us watching this, we can't say that's true. We all pretty much have access to health care, even if we have to pay some high bills. Fortunately, this is not the same story for immigrants. They don't have safe access. So, I want to talk about through protecting immigrant rights, we're able to strengthen our healthcare system and our public safety. I'm going to talk about this by talking about how the federal government and state government differ on their policies to access of healthcare, and then the fear that immigrants have of public health due to the inconsistencies in these policies that cause safety risks for the immigrants, and then how documented, undocumented, and the children of immigrants all have discrepancies in their access to health. My first point is talking about how the states can expand or restrict benefits due to already set in place federal laws. So, Ayers talks about how the federal governments require states to treat non-citizens and citizens as two separate groups, whereas our Constitution wants to treat non-citizens and citizens as the same group. Ayers continues talking about because of these discrepancies between the federal law, constitution that states have to follow, states have to interpret immigration rights completely differently, meaning different states have different access to public health care. So these federal laws establish strict eligibility requirements for programs offering access to public benefits such as healthcare and or education, housing, and food. So Martin talks about how undocumented immigrants that have been living in the United States for several years that later obtain their visa often wait really long periods before they get access to public benefits such as healthcare, even though they've been working in the United States and paying their taxes. The author Young continues talking about that these federal laws and establishing strict eligibility requirements also have started enforcing criminalization policies that are incredibly strict, which have caused a term that we call deportability. This just means that when immigrants are trying to access their lawful public access to healthcare, they're often still detained and deported out of the United States, even though what they were doing was legally correct through state laws, federal laws, and the Constitution. With all of that said, that's what causes the fear in immigrants. So, the inconsistencies in all of the policies between federal and state is what causes fear and anxiety for immigrants to access their public health care. So, Ayers even states this by talking about how the inconsistencies in policy and lack of rights for the families of immigrants leaves their families vulnerable and afraid to access health care. The author Roth also talks about that one of the side effects of weakened protections that we see in our federal care is that immigrant children seeking asylum in the United States cannot have access to health care because they're being detained on the border and policies won't allow them to have access to health care. So, with the fear of consequences that immigrants have with our healthcare policy, they don't seek out their public healthcare benefits. The author Lockhart talks about this and how immigrants don't have many public healthcare benefits. The ones that they do, they don't seek out. The ones that are legally available for them and they would have no consequences of accessing them, they still are fearful of them because of this new term deportability that we've seen in many recent years. The author Young talks about how this fear ruins the effectiveness of healthcare and the benefits of healthcare that prevents the access to the benefits. For my last point, I want to talk about how obtaining visas is incredibly overwhelming for families and how that keeps them from accessing their healthcare benefits. So for families that are trying to seek asylum in the United States, there's a different visa for every family. These are umbrella term called family visas, but each family can apply for a different visa. There's over 20 different visas they can apply for, depending on the reason they're seeking asylum, why they're here, how many family members, what they want to access in the United States, et cetera, et cetera. Because of these different sets of eligibility requirements, application procedure, waiting time, it's often hard for immigrants to access visas, which leaves them becoming undocumented citizens in the United States. So, when parents are undocumented citizens of the United States, often their children aren't. Often the children are born on US soil and have more access to health care than their parents do. Despite this, the children often don't take advantage of what's available to them because their parents are too afraid of being deported because of the deportability that we've talked about earlier. So these differences in policy causes extreme challenges to mixed households to access public health. These mixed households are exactly what I was giving you an example before, where the parents are undocumented citizens or illegal immigrants, and the children are documented citizens and legal immigrants of the United States of America. So it's observed that in these discrepancies and public benefits between documented, undocumented, and the children of immigrant families, procedures are inconsistent, and access to social services for immigrants is often limited or none. In conclusion, I want to state again that through protecting immigrant rights, we can protect our healthcare system and our public safety. I want to really highlight on the fact that these immigrants are often seeking asylum and seeking safety in our country. And by taking away their public health care, they can't seek the safety that they really need. So, in conclusion, thank you for listening to this talk. I know it was a lot of information. I appreciate you listening. Thank you.